This presentation will feature an actual demonstration of one of the tools that Impact has developed so far. So there may be a number of people to the sides of the room who'd like to come a little bit more central before I start. I'd also like to thank various other people. There's hardly any original work in this presentation. It was all done for me by other people, including Ali and two colleagues from IBM who can't be here today, and Gert Zechmeister of the ONB. So, public participation in mass digitisation. Why do we think that might be a good idea? Well, this is to some extent to do with the background to the Impact project, which Ali has already spoken about. We had a Conference of European National Library survey in 2008, which noted that that in 5 years there had been a 350% increase in the digitisation of historic texts, and that's good news. 8 million digital items in existence, that's good news. So we can say that we've entered into an era of the mass digitisation of historical text. But the bad news, and there's always some bad news, comes from the British Library's own research. We found, by and large, having run a couple of OCR-based projects, that OCR tools are good, but at the moment, the state of the art, not good enough. On average, upwards of 20% of words get lost, and this is due to loss of letters, loss of actual words, and what we call in the British Library significant words. Significant words, just to give a brief gloss on this, are words that we think that users will search for. So we're not talking about the or a or prepositions or pronouns or small parts of speech in the English language. We're talking about names, we're talking about common concepts that we think people will be looking for. So here are some common characteristics of digital text images. Here we see a page that is obviously sliding down towards the gutter. And this is what it looks like if you put it through an OCR engine. It doesn't look like text, or it doesn't look in any way comprehensible. You have lots of substituted characters and letters right the way through it. Also misleading recognitions. For instance, this is a result for internet, which comes from a newspaper in 1818. The word is actually interest, but because, as you can see, the ink is quite faint, and I think the image is a little bit skewed as well. The internet, 1818. So collaborative correction is something that's been going around for the last few years, basically, as an idea of how we might, if we can't get the perfect OCR system, how we might either train the perfect OCR system into existence or compensate for its lack by basically crowdsourcing. We've already mentioned capture systems, and you'll know if you've ever posted on a blog or a website, before you do it, you may have to recognize or type in a series of keys before it will let you submit your request. But that's word by word. And I think this is the third or fourth mention of Rose Holly and the Australian newspaper digitisation project today. But as many of you will have seen, and I link to a presentation about this in my own presentation, what they are actually doing, what they decided to do, was to let users collaborate to correct texts. And I don't know if any of you have ever kind of used the Australian Australian newspapers site, but it's actually quite labour intensive. It takes a long time to correct a single article. And I mean, I've done it out of personal research, but I wouldn't feel any great enthusiasm, the way some people evidently do, to keep doing it day after day and week after week. So the impact view, and this is from our description of work, is that mass digitisation demands the creation of a new digitisation paradigm by mobilising the general public to help with the large-scale digitisation efforts. And the impact approach is to develop a tool called CONCERT, or the Cooperative Engine for the Correction of Extracted Text, which is a data validation correction application that is simple and intuitive enough to be attractive to untrained users and yet effective enough to ensure high productivity. So what we're trying to address is something that I kind of mentioned with regard to the Australian newspapers. Let's make it less keyboard intensive than it is. Let's make people keep going. It will also, and this is a work in progress, feature automatic data management that allows for the combination of results from several users at once. One of the limitations of the Australian approach is that only one user can really work on one document or one article at a time. When we build a management system, lots of people will be able to be given jobs to correct a single volume and hopefully get it done that much faster. The system architecture, I think Sven already outlined a little bit. There's a secure login. You upload books volumes as either image files or by URL if they are already in a web space. You can select the language and it runs OCR on it. And you can download either the original OCR result or before or after you start to correct it. So you can just sort of use it to extract text or OCR results as well as. The system workflow, which I think Sven also went into a little bit, I'm not going to spend too long ago, but there are three main points of it, and they can be identified as being a character level, a word level, and a page level. And the idea is that the characters session is supposed to be quite intensive, but you're supposed to clear up most of the mistakes doing that. The word session is supposed to be less intensive, and by the time you get to the page level session, perhaps only the most difficult items will remain to be corrected. I may skip the next 3 slides actually, and just go straight to the demonstration. But before we go, just so we get a start on this, in the character session, because when you upload a book, certain things happen invisibly. You don't see them happening. As soon as you upload a book into the system, it's OCR'd for you, and you don't have to press a button for it to be OCR'd. And so it's binarized and segmented and all of that. And it does what most OCR engines do, and our default engine is Abby, which is that it assigns a confidence value to each of the characters. But where this tool starts to work is that it makes a graphical representation of those confidence values, and it picks out the ones that it thinks are suspicious. So high confidence results, generally speaking, don't require verification, but some high confidence results may be misrecognitions, so they will also be included. Individual character images are extracted and grouped together based on recognition results, and the user selects and submits suspicious characters. This is going to make sense in a second. There's going to be some terrible technical thing now, isn't there? Well, you can ask me questions now. Yeah, this worked fine this morning. Cannot download the information requested. I'll tell you what.
Leave PowerPoint, I had the same problem before.
Okay, I don't know what I did there. I'm going to copy it.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Escape.
Escape. Copy. As you can tell, I'm a highly technical individual. Oh God. Right. I'll just go in here. All of this is being captured on camera, by the way, so you'll be able to see them fumbling about in retrospect. Who was that fool from the British Library who came to see us? UB. It worked this morning. Okay.
Enter.
Oh, I have pressed enter. You can see a little green line. Well, I think I might as well carry on with the presentation as it was going, seeing as this is obviously going to take some time. Right, once you've done the character session, oh, I've gone right back to the start. Once you've done the character session, you move on to the word session. And the things that you've selected, the characters that you've selected as being low confidence, you now see those characters again, only you see them in context. You see them in the words that they belong to. it also, when it shows you a word it doesn't recognise, it shows you a number of potential words from the OCR engine's own dictionary that may or may not be the answer. And if they are the answer, you just tick them off and validate them that way. But if it doesn't offer you an option, you can type in the correct word as you see it. And then the final session is the page session, which is usually used primarily where segmentation failure has led to a word being misrecognised or not recognised at all. So for instance, where at the end of a line, a page has been chopped into two, that's where the page session will come in handy. Text can be shown in a variety of segmentation views, so you can look at it word by word, line by line, by paragraph, or by tag. And the system can be automated to move from one problematic word to the next, so you don't have to search. Right, this thing should have loaded. No, it hasn't loaded. That's ridiculous.
Leave it a moment.
Okay. Well, I'll come back to that at the end of the presentation, hopefully. Let's just come on. So that's where we are at the moment.
Did you read the address again?
Yep. Okay. That's the system as it exists at the moment. Have you got it? Cool. Right.
Where is it?
If you go to history,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, we can just pause it for the time being. It should work in a second.
It will work.
It will work.
Yeah.
Yes.
Are we moving?
Yeah.
We are. Let me go back to the
Yeah.
start of this. This is what I've been explaining to you, and I'm going to explain it to you again because you're very patient. I'll pause it. It won't let me pause. Okay, and move back to the start. Right. I don't know how clear all of this is going to be, but basically this is what it looks like. The first option is to create or add to a book, which basically means to upload a book or to create one of the books or to edit one of the books that already exists. So they're on a list on the left-hand side of the page. Once you've selected the book, you can either download the metadata as it is immediately or select what kind of metadata you'd like it to output in. And then you go to the character session. And here you see what the user is doing is that they're selecting from a palette of V's, and they're only selecting those ones that they think are suspicious, i.e. they don't look like V's, they may be something else. If you reject these items, incidentally, you're not rejecting them, they don't disappear, they move into the word session. The same happens with the W's here. The user isn't sure that they are a W, and so he highlights them in red and he submits them to the next stage. And the next stage is the word session. And here's where all of the corrections that you didn't manage to complete in the first session come back to you. And you can actually see all of the suspicious characters in the context of their word. And if a word is correct, you can just click it as green from one of the selection options. But if it's not correct, or if you want rejected, or you reject it, or you can't tell what it is, you can either reject it as suspicious again, or you can put in your own spelling. The final session is, as I said, the page session, where you get to see absolutely everything in context. It will show you even high confidence results here, but you can set it up so that it goes line by line, word by word, or character by character. And you can type in the corrections as you go along, again at line or character session. But the hope would be that by the time you get to this stage, there wouldn't actually be too much correction to do. And because the system is to some extent adaptive, it's hoped that as you go through, for instance, a book, while you might spend a great deal of time on the first couple of pages, as you and the operator get more into it, it takes less and less time because, to some extent, the tool has been trained on this book and its particular vocabulary. So I think that is more or less it for the demonstration, which means another dreadful faff while I switch back to this computer. I will, however, thank you, at the end of this session, if anybody wants to see the tool themselves, I do have a machine of my own on which it works, and if you'd like to have a play around with it yourself after sort of 5 o'clock, or ask some more pertinent questions, or even just give advice on usability, I'd be very happy to see you. So that's what it looks like now, and that was it being used in its simplest fashion. So what's it going to look like in a year, or by the time the Impact project ends? For this year, improved user job monitoring. So, as with captures, there'll be the introduction of planned errors to validate operator progress, so people aren't just sort of selecting letters just to get through a job. Productivity and quality benchmarking, and correction and validation system for document dictionaries. This is a kind of an experimental approach in a way, which considers every volume that you capture, in a sense, to be a kind of dictionary of itself. Each corrected book will produce a unique dictionary that can be reused on other works. So if you have an 18th century work on theology, and you have another 18th century work on theology, perhaps you could use the document dictionary created from one to improve recognition results on the other. And this will also include the general language and name dictionaries being produced by Impact as part of its core work. There will be a distributed workflow management tool and an administrative session, and a greater number of output formats for OCR results and corrected results. And finally, I think really a super key session, which is experimental but which is still planned for this year, where character is validated by the creation of an ideal character pattern. This isn't, well, this is fairly leading edge, but it's something that lots of people in pattern recognition will tell you about. So where you, for instance, have a page of V's, as we saw in that demonstration, it will create almost a platonic ideal against which future V's could be measured within the same font or script face, and therefore hopefully improve recognition results that way. And then the final step is the full integration of the tool into the Impact adaptive OCR system. So we can plug in dictionaries and the various other tools that Sven outlined in the previous session, and therefore build a sort of end-to-end OCR workflow within the project. Any questions? Well, I apologise for the technical trouble.
What kind of license console tool will be available after it's finished?
Do I want to answer this? I don't want to answer this.
I can give an answer.
Yeah.
You will contact the IBM sales point in your country, and IBM, the national IBM company, will work as integrator, and the research group in Haifa will do the third level support.
So does anybody just, as a sort of general poll, does anybody see how a system like that could be used in their own institution? And do you see that, like, if, for instance, you could build a sort of distributed workflow tool and distribute a volume, for instance, to students or something like that, so they would each correct maybe 2 pages and no more than that? Do people here feel that this is something that they could or would implement in their own institutions? Yeah. And is there anything in the plan that, so far, quite aside from how you get access to it, that you don't see? Is there anything that we're missing? Nope. Well, I think that's it then. Thank you.